There is a verse in the Message Bible in Proverbs 11:25 that says, "The one who blesses others is abundantly blessed." Welcome to episode 1 of my new podcast, As Archie Sees It. I have been walking the road to recovery since 1987. In that time, I have had many opportunities to share my experience, strength, and hope with a lot of people from many different nations of the world. God has opened a lot of doors for me since 1989, when Jesus Christ invited me to let him lead in my life. Not as easy a decision as many may think for someone whose life revolved around my drug of choice, which was alcohol. It took me 2 weeks to decide, and when I did, I found myself at the mercy seat in a Salvation Army midweek chapel service at the rehab where I had gone after running out of places to run in my life to get away from me. From the completion of the Salvation Army Bridge program in 1989, I have been involved in a number of different recovery fellowship groups and meetings. Some Christian, some not. A couple of things they all had in common were the belief that the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous change lives, and that the 12 steps are dependent on a higher power to achieve success. I believe both those things. What I also believe is that the only higher power that helped me to achieve success in recovery has a name. His name is Jesus Christ, and if you want to learn what he says about living life in recovery, you can read it and study it in the Bible. For me, my walk began in 1987 when I was 23 years old, addicted to alcohol at the age of 15, living a life without hope, always looking for an easier, softer way, believing that the right job, right relationship, and right address would lead to successful living. It didn't, and I tried a few of each of them. Psalm 77:4-5 in the Message Bible says, "I'm awake all night, not a wink of sleep. I can't even say what's bothering me." I go over the days one by one. Thinking back to my life pre-recovery, I can relate to that verse so much. I didn't think there was anything wrong with me. Since leaving school, I have always been employed, lived a life that was acceptable in the eyes of the world, but I didn't feel right. In 1987, in my first rehab, there were 2 old guys who, when they shared their stories, spoke about Jesus Christ as their high power. I wasn't getting a lot out of AA literature at the time, so I invested in a Bible-based recovery devotional to start each day with. It helped a bit as I tried to apply it to my daily living, but my life was still a mess. I kept going to AA meetings, kept learning the 12 steps. I even helped establish a couple of new AA groups as people put their faith in me because I got good at talking the talk. About 18 months into my search for sober living, I relapsed. Toward the end of that relapse, alone and feeling sorry for myself, God spoke to me. Now, before people come back at me and say, "How do you know it was God?" Wait till I explain what happened in my life as a result of my belief that God spoke to me. What he said to me was, "Archie, if you want to get serious about recovery, you need to leave Western Australia." All of my teenage life was spent in Rockingham in Western Australia. I lived there with my family after arriving from Scotland in December 1974. I had, as a result of my addiction and addictive personality, moved several times to other states in Australia. The problem was I kept taking myself, the broken me with me, which resulted in life going pear-shaped again. And I don't know why, but after hearing from God, I decided to leave Western Australia and move to South Australia. Moving to South Australia with no support network, limited funds and knowing no one, arriving late afternoon, I did the only thing I could think of at the time. I rang Alcoholics Anonymous in Adelaide and asked them if they knew anywhere I could get a bed for the night. They suggested there were several men's hostels in Whitmore Square in Adelaide, not far from the bus station I arrived at. I spent several nights, sometimes sleeping rough on the street, sometimes in one of the men's hostels around Whitmore Square, with no money and nowhere to go. I found myself in the Salvation Army William Booth Men's Hostel in Whitmore Square. Because I had spent all my money on drinking, a staff member at William Booth told me if I wanted to stay longer in the hostel I had to meet with the superintendent, Captain John Henderson, a Salvation Army officer from Paisley, where I was born and spent all my primary school years in Scotland. I met with Captain Henderson, who told me I could stay, but only if I was willing to volunteer to help out in the kitchen at Whitmore Square. So I moved into a bed at the hostel, volunteering in the kitchen through the day, drinking and running amok at night. I think at that time I spent more nights in the sobering up unit at Whitmore Square than I did sleeping in the hostel. On one of my visits to the sobering up unit, I heard about a farm-based alcohol and drug program operated by the Salvation Army in Mount Barker, South Australia. I told one of the alcohol and drug counsellors that I would like to go there and was told, "Sorry, you don't have the right attitude for that program." Despondent and disappointed, I hung around the sobering up unit that day when a new Salvation Army officer arrived who had been appointed to Whitmore Square. I knew him a bit from WA and had interacted with him whilst in the first rehab in Rockingham. He asked me when he saw me, "What's the matter, Archie?" I told him the council had told me I was not the right sort of person for the farm program in Mount Barker. He told the counsellor to make sure I was in the program by the end of the day. That afternoon, a member of the Salvation Army Residential Services drove me to Mount Barker to the Bridge program. On arrival, I was told to go straight to the group. The group they were in at the time was a 12-step group. They were talking about step 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry it out. As I said previously, I had spent a lot of time learning the 12 steps, not applying them, but learning them. So I found it easy that day to dominate the discussion of step 11. Later, once I got settled into accommodation, I started to reflect on step 11. It was like an aha moment for me, where I realised in the past I had not had any contact with God, nor had I ever considered God's will for my life. The first day on the Salvation Army Bridge program, I made a conscious decision that whilst on the Bridge program, I would investigate the question, where is God in my life? From day one, I concentrated and investigated everything I could to understand that question. Now, to those of you who may have asked the question, how did you know it was God? I ask you the question, how could it not have been God? And so ends the first episode of As Archie Sees It. If you enjoyed this or found any of it helpful, join me in episode 2. Or to read or hear more of my experience, strength and hope of living life in recovery, go to my website, livingliferecovery.com. There's a verse in the Bible, 2 Corinthians 7 verse 10, that says, distress that drives us to God does that. It turns us around. It gets us back in the way of salvation. We never regret that kind of pain. Recovery is not easy. For me, it has been simple. God leads, I follow. Not always easy, always simple. He is God and He knows what is best for me, so I need to listen to Him, learn His will, and follow where He leads me.